Hey YouTube, welcome back to the channel. On today's episode of Garage Noise, we have a Chevy pickup truck with dents on both doors and the bedside. We're going to do a complete body and paint repair on this vehicle today. I'm going to show you how it's done. I'm working hard to bring you great content. Do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to like and share this video. If you have a question or you just want to say hey, be sure to leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you. Okay, so we're going to start with this dent, the larger dent in this bedside. I'm going to grind off the paint in order to prepare it to remove that dent and pull that dent out. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can pull this dent out, but what I'm going to use in this video is the G90E. It takes bare metal and you weld a tip to it and pull the dent out. So we're going to prepare it and get ready to use that tool. Okay, so if you're doing this repair at home and you don't have a G90E dent puller, you can push this dent out from the back side as long as you have access and it's not double walled. I can't remember if this is or not, but a hammer and a dolly will take this dent out. You could also drill holes in the crease and then pull it out with a slide hammer tool. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this G90E dent puller to weld onto the crease, all along that crease, and gradually pull that dent out. Now, what you want to do is you want to pull this dent out, but you also want to knock the high areas of the crowns that are around this dent down while you do it. When the panel gets dented, it creates a high area or a crown around the dent, and you want to knock that down as you're pulling the dent out. Now, if you haven't seen the video on the G90E, I'll leave it at the end. So if you're interested in learning more about the G90E, that video will teach you everything you need to know about it. I'm not going to go into great detail about that tool in this video. And as always, all the links to the products and the tools I use will be in the description down below. So just a quick tip when you're pulling out dents. You want to try to avoid over pulling a dent. You do not want to have it over pulled because that creates a big problem when you're trying to straighten a panel and prep it for paint. If anything, you want to leave it, you want it to be as straight as possible or a little bit in, so a thin coat of filler will help you to straighten it. Okay, so now we're going to grind the rest of the paint off so we can remove the rest of these dents in this panel. Okay, so now we're going to start working on this upper dent. It's just a small little dent here that we're going to grind it down to bare metal and then pull it out with the G90E. Okay, so we're going to start to address the dents in these doors. In order to do that, I need to remove this molding. So I'm just using a plastic trim removal tool and a hammer, and I'm knocking off the 3M tape behind it so I don't damage the molding. You could also use fishing line and saw it back and forth, and that does a really good job of removing that molding. Okay, so now let's prepare this dent to be pulled and grind off the paint. Be careful not to hit that molding. I'm going to remove that later on, but right now I'm just prepping out this dent so I can use the tool and start pulling it out. So I'm starting to pull this dent out in the front door, the rear part of this front door, and I was having a little bit of trouble because the G90E was not welding very well. And what I found out is that the problem was I still had the ground hooked up on the bed. So when I moved the ground up to the rear door, it worked perfectly. So just a quick tip for you: if you have this tool, that ground needs to be relatively close. I mean, it doesn't need to be close, but I think having it on the bed was just too far away for that ground. Okay, so you can see here as I'm pulling, I'm knocking down a high crown around this dent, and that helps to bring out the dent. I just put a little bit of pressure on it with the slide hammer and then knock down the crown, and that helps level out that metal. So on this dent, it was dented right on that crease of the door, or that high point of that door. So I wanted to pull that high point out first and get that in the right position. And then we're going to go around and take out these littler dents. It's kind of a weird dent. It's kind of a ripple effect. So we're going to pull those out, knock down the high spots, and get it straightened out. So down here at the bottom of the door, it also created a crown. You see me knocking down right there to get that flattened out. So this dent, I don't really need to use the slide hammer portion of this tool. I'm just doing a little bit of a pull. There was a little ding there from whatever he hit. It creased it right there. So we're just pulling that crease out and we'll get it ready for body filler. So now I'm just running over this with some 80 grit around this dent because we're just prepping it out for body filler. You can apply body filler over paint. The industry has went back and forth on that, whether it's okay to do that or not. Back in the 80s, they said they recommended that you put it over the paint so you don't remove any rust inhibitors that are underneath the paint. And then they changed that. So it just depends on the situation. You're going to be okay with today's body fillers to put it over top of paint, as long as you have at least an 80 grit scratch for that Bondo to adhere to. Okay, so now I'm just doing some finish work on this dent on this bedside, removing all the little low areas so we can have a really good repair and we don't have to use very much body filler. Okay, let's show you what we got going on here. We've got this dent all pulled out. We used that G90E dent puller and it came out real nice. You can see there's just a couple little indentions there, but otherwise it's really straight. So it should just take a thin coat of body filler. We have to 80 grit around this. I've already went around it with 80 grit, but I'm gonna do it again just so if the body filler gets outside this on this paint, then it's gonna adhere properly. Same thing here. We got an 80 grit around that, but it's pulled out, that little ding, and that went over there. And that came out real nice. That was real easy to pull out. And the dent, the G90E worked great. Here's the G90E. If you haven't seen the video, check it out. I'll leave a link at the end. So we're gonna use the Rage Ultra. I've used it before, it works really well. It's a little bit more expensive body filler. It's like 60 to 70 bucks for this gallon, which is quite expensive, but it works really well. It sands really easy. So sometimes it pays to pay a little extra for a quality body filler that's gonna give you really good results. I shouldn't need a whole lot of body filler. These dents are pretty straight, but we'll see. I think that's gonna be about enough. Something like that, and we're gonna mix it up, fold it in. Fold it in until it's all one consistent color. Okay, so for this one, I'm just gonna use the larger spreader. Just get a little bit on here and then smooth it in up to this body line. and around. Okay, so I had a few little low areas and high areas I needed to straighten out, so I'm applying another little thin coat. I believe this is body filler that I'm using here, and we're going to block this out again to get it straight. Okay, so it's time to block out this body filler on these doors. I'm going to use the long block on the Deros system. That's a vacuum system that vacuums up the dust. I'm using 80 grit sandpaper to block this straight on the long board. You want to use the long board whenever possible. If you have a larger area to block straight, it helps to get it straighter. On these smaller ones, I'm going to use a smaller block. But we're using 80 grit right now, and that is just to shape this body filler, and then we'll move on to 180 to remove those 80 grit scratches. So I'm using the rubber eraser wheel to remove the 3M double-sided tape. And now we're going to switch over to 180 grit to block this out some more and remove those 80 grit scratches and just help to get it straight. Okay, so we have this pretty much straight. It came out real easy with that G90 dent puller. Then we put a little bit of body filler in it. Now I'm just gonna put a little bit of icing, a glaze coat. This is just to fill any scratches or remove any little waves that are in it. We're gonna block that straight and then we'll get it prepped out for primer. So I'm gonna mix up some icing. Now I finished this. I went over with 80 and did all the sanding with 80 and the blocking and to straighten it out. And then I went over it with 180 to remove some of those scratches. And now we're gonna put icing over it and then block it with 180. So when you're blocking this, you want to use an X pattern. Go one direction and then go the other direction, and that helps get it straight. Be mindful of the contours of the panel. You want to go with those contours. You don't want to knock down, like I'm not blocking right on that ridge because I don't want to knock that ridge down. I want it to be the same as the rest of the vehicle. So we're blocking down to the ridge and then we'll block up to the ridge, and that'll keep that ridge intact and that body line intact so we don't have any issues there. Okay, so now I'm going to go over this area with 320 grit sandpaper on the dual action sander. We're going to smooth out any of those 180 grit scratches before we prime this. So let's tape it up for primer. As you can see, I've got the heat lamp on that door. It's a really cold day, so I'm trying to heat up these panels just a little bit before I spray the primer. Okay, I'm just spraying this primer with this knockoff ProLite gun. It has a 1.3 tip. works well for this primer that I'm using. This is a 2K urethane primer. This is a high build primer, but it's not super thick, so I don't need a real large tip for it. It's very real well. This knockoff Pro-Like gun is not a good gun, so primer. That's why I'm not going to put steam on it and show you guys it. So I'm going to get this covered with primer. Let's block this out and get a nice straight finish. Again, doing the bedside here as well. So I went ahead and sprayed some guide coat on these repair areas. Now what we're gonna do is go ahead and block these out, see what we get. We're gonna use 320 grit sandpaper. I'm gonna use a soft block on this contoured area here, and then a hard flat block on those. Okay, so the next step is we have everything primed with our final coat of primer. So now we're gonna prep out these panels for paint and clear. So we gotta get this door ready, this door, and then the bedside. Now, what we wanna do is I've already cleaned this with some prep solvent to remove any contaminants that might be on these panels. And what we need to do next is to sand this with 600 grit sandpaper on the orbital sander. Now, I'm gonna go over all the large areas with the DA and 600 grit, and I'm gonna use an interface pad. And what the interface pad is, it's this pad right here that's soft, so it moves with the panel. And this interface pad will help keep you from burning through any of these body lines, like this roll here, or anywhere that you don't wanna sand through. Okay, so let's get right into getting these 3 panels prepped out for paint. Okay, so now it's time to mask this truck off for paint. We're gonna back tape these doors. We're gonna tape up the windows. I've taken out the handles and most of the trim areas, the weather belts, that type of thing. We're gonna get this all ready for paint, cover it with plastic, and then get to spraying. Okay, so here's a good look at the paint job after the flow coat of clear. That's the final coat. It has a nice gloss on it, very little trash in it. It does have a little bit, so we're going to do a light cut and buff on this, which is a wet sanding and polishing. We're going to put it all together, and then we'll take a better look at it here at the end. If you enjoy this content and appreciate it, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel and like this video and leave a comment down below. So here's the truck all put together, all finished. As you can see, the dents came out really nice. The customer is going to be very pleased with this job. Stay tuned to the channel because we have a lot of great videos coming up. I have a couple different builds, a little bit different videos where we're going to do some modifications to a shop truck and some other things. I appreciate you watching. Stay tuned. We'll see you next time.